The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. He's been here many times before. I obviously knew him a little bit longer than I've been running this show, by just a smidge. He's not just my dad. He's not just a rabbi. He's not just a role model for myself and all my sibling and the rest of siblings and his Kananahara, many offspring. But he happens to have a doctorate in medieval Christian Muslim relations, which is why he's been my mentor with respect to a lot of things in life, and in particular areas related to the Middle East. And he's been here many times on the show and popularly referred to as Great Lawgic, affectionately known as Great Lawgic. I bring to you my dad, Rabbi Yaakov Tzviner. And hello, Dad. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Before I say anything at all, really, I sent to my son. I sent him.
I was gonna ask you how you're doing. I was gonna have like
I'm fine. I'm good. Except that I was at your nephew's graduation and went to sleep at 2 a.m. yesterday. I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
All right.
You're
except
fine.
for that.
And I'm going to publicly wish you what I wished you the other day, which is a happy birthday. My dad just celebrated his 81st birthday 2 days ago. So yeah, his birthday is June 12th. My son's birthday is June 13th, and today is President Donald Trump's birthday.
Right.
So there you go.
That's true.
There you go.
It's like Flag Day, Flagday.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just to make sure that people knew you said the word flag specifically. I appreciate you spelling that, Dad. So
my mind doesn't work that way.
No, of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't, despite the fact that it's a very boastful month. So anyway, just want to catch up with you.
In Arabic, there's a word to kiss and a word to give, and it's the same word almost, only you accent it slightly differently. And it's true with a lot of words in a lot of languages.
Indeed. So
in French, you can, if you say the word for two, deux, and you say it the word deux instead of dieu or deux, there's all different words. They're spelled very differently, but they sound the same, almost the same.
All right. Well, when we first started talking about doing this show, right? Because we always I always am saying to you, I want to have something that's timely. I can talk to my dad anytime. I can bring him on anytime, but especially because of his area of expertise. So whenever there's something that's happening in the Middle East, I feel like it's an opportune time to bring him on and get his thoughts on that, as well as other events of the day. And then you mentioned this movie. So I want to talk to you about the whole situation developing between America and Iran and negotiations that Biden is engaging in. But you mentioned that there was a movie that you wanted me to share with the audience. So I'm going to let you run. I'll let you run this part. Which would you prefer to start with? Do you want to start with the movie, or you want to start with?
I want to start the movie, but first I want to say something. The name of the movie, it talks about miracles in the movie. Now I want to explain there's a Jewish concept of miracles, and it is not too alien from most other religions, this concept. It's also true in Islam and to some extent in Christianity. I'm going to tell you a story I once heard. There's a parable. There's a man wants to make a wedding for his daughter. And however, in order to get this particular groom, who is a scholar, a Jewish scholar, he has to supply income for 2 years. Again, this by the way could be real.
It's like a dowry kind of thing.
It's like a dowry, but it's money, living expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the wedding is expensive. Again, this is a story, but it makes a point. And the man doesn't have the money. And a week goes by, another week goes by, and he's getting a little nervous. God, I need the money. I need the money. Suddenly, he bumps into this fellow who knows him from the 3rd grade. The guy says, look, you turned my life around in the 3rd grade.
You keep going, Dad. Keep going. Keep going. It's a WWE reference. Go on.
I'm going to tell you, I'll give you the money. And not only will I give you the money, for 2 years, I will pay for the whole wedding, the wedding clothes, and so forth and so on. Because I'm a multimillionaire, I can do this easily.
Keep going. I didn't mean to.
He says, all you got to do is make the phone call between 4 and 4:15. So the fellow is busy, and you would think, I mean, I know if it's I would be waiting with an alarm clock, but this guy, of course, of the story, is busy. And suddenly he realizes it's 4:20, and he calls, and he gets the guy, and the guy said, I said you got to call between 4 and 4:15. Anyway, this happened several times. I'm cutting it short. And if you can't call between 4 and 4:15, forget it. Miracles happen, but you got to kick in your effort. If you don't kick in your effort and make your attempt, you're not going to get it what you want. Now, you got to keep that in mind when you see this film, because this film shows things, but a miracle can happen through nature. But if something is really extremely unlikely and it happens, it's called a miracle. Really unlikely, but a big deal thing happens. Now, let me give you a background to the movie. The movie,
and just to explain what you just said, the concept of a miracle is something that there is nature and the rules of nature. So when you have a situation that's that's the opposite of nature, that's foreign to nature, that's what makes something considered miraculous. I mean, religious Jews, as you're aware, look at nature itself as being miraculous. But when we're defining something as being miraculous, its definition is that these events are in stark contrast to what are typical in nature. That's why when you say like something completely foreign and unexpected is miraculous, because it's unnatural.
But if 3 guys, God forbid, break into a man who's 80 years old into his house and they try to attack him, and he manages to somehow get the jump on them, hit them over the head with a chair or a book, knock one out, hit the other one in the vital spot with something else, and he lays them all out, and he's not a karate expert, I would call this a mini miracle. Okay. It's not normal.
Right.
Something you wouldn't ever think could happen.
Right. I understand.
Now, you got to place this film in that context. When 5 Arabs, first of all, the Arabs, before the state of Israel is declared, the Arabs are ready to get 5 Arab nations with standing armies are coming against a bunch of people with a ragtag put together army from a bunch of groups who are resistance groups to the Brits. And they put this together. And they have, for example, they actually showed this in a movie. The Air Force is a couple of planes, literally about 5 planes. And they managed to stop the Arabs because they drop soda bottles that are open, and they, boop, and the Arabs think they're being bombed, so they run away. This kind of stuff is not normal. That's what I'm telling you. Now, go ahead, show the film, and I will stop it and maybe comment on the way a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. And I've not I just to let you know, I have not pre-screened this movie, so I'm trusting my father that he's not going to get me yeeted from YouTube. I don't know what we're about to watch.
No, you won't get it. It's on YouTube, this film.
I'm just kidding, Dad. All right, so let's get it started. It's only a 10-minute movie. It's not a long movie.
Yeah. Oh, no. And I'm not going to show the end anyway. And we'll stop at a certain
point. Movie News brings you the latest incident to upset the chancelleries of
the Muslim nations in the Middle East would not accept Israel's existence since its founding in 1948. They began amassing huge amounts of sophisticated weaponry and lobbying for the implementation of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against the Jewish state. On the 15th of May, 1967, on Israel's Independence Day, a 3-week period began, which was one of the most tense and fearful periods in Israel's history. In direct contravention of international agreements, Egyptian leader Jamal Abdel Nasser removed the UN peacekeeping forces and began moving tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of tanks into what was the demilitarized Sinai Peninsula
Stop this for a
towards
minute.
Israel's southern border.
Stop it for a minute. The Nasser put out stamps showing Egyptian soldiers trotting in Israel and Jews drowning in the water. All right? Another one, another stamp with a tank. Prepare for the battle. But there are different words in Arabic for battle. And the word he used for battle was qatl, which means the killing zone. All right? This is what they were expecting and planning. Go on.
In other words, that they expected it to be a massacre.
Right. Absolutely. When you hear what happened, you'll see exactly what happened, those of you. I mean, I remember, of course, I was alive during this, and I'll comment on that later when something comes up. Right. Go ahead.
And it just brings to mind, basically everyone was hearing this. I love that sound effect. I'll never get enough of it.
Egypt also blockaded the Straits of Tiran, an open international waterway, which was essentially a declaration of war.
It was also the way Israel was going to
the world primarily.
It was also Israel's main port to Asia. That's how Israel got to Asia from there. Ships. Okay, go ahead.
To the United States for assistance against Egyptian aggression, but somehow all Western countries decided to remain neutral. Very quickly, it became apparent that the promises were all but forgotten. Israel, with 2.5 million Jews, was left alone to face the might of the Arab nations. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon formed a military alliance and began moving forces into Jordan towards Israel's borders. When the Arab...
Now, to give some context, Israel literally was just founded. So, where does Israel have a military from at all to defend this attack?
Well, this is 67, not 48.
Oh, this is 67, 48.
Right,
but back in 48, I always wondered back in 48.
By the way, I did send you 2 films, but that was the other one. But I will mention on this, very interesting, Israel's 11 miles wide then in the center. And that, by the way, is what the PLO says they want back. So there will be 11 miles. We could talk about that. Right. And of course, they say they're going to destroy Israel. They still say it's not 2 states. I want to make this point. It's not 2 states.
Right.
One Palestinian state. That is their goal. And we'll get into that specifically later.
There's never been a single day where they said that when we resolve this, there'll be an Israeli state. There's never been any offer from Palestinian Authority that there's such a feasible possibility.
And I was going to read it to you later, part of it. I have an English translation of Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip. And why do they control the Gaza Strip? Because Israel voluntarily gave them the Gaza Strip for peace. And their covenant says we will destroy Israel. We'll obliterate Israel. It's all Palestine, and we'll obliterate Israel. Shortly after they took control, they made an offer to Israel. If every Arab who's ever wanted to come in here can come in to Israel, we'll make peace. Give us the area you took in 67, and let every Arab who wants to come in, who has any claim to having ever lived anywhere near here, come in and move into Israel. Of course, that's why they'll overwhelm us.
Right.
Go ahead.
Countries realized that the world had abandoned Israel. Many other Muslim countries were openly calling for the destruction of Israel. The will and means to murder millions of Jews were evident. Top IDF commanders expressed their concerns at the high price Israel was liable to pay in a war with the Arab world. Some military experts projected a toll between 20 and 100,000 lives. Israel prepared cemeteries all over the country.
Yes, stop for a minute. Yeah.
Many expected victims.
And they actually opened up the parks, your open yards, wherever. They dug them up to prepare cemeteries for 10,000 bodies.
An expectation.
Civilians, an expectation of what would happen.
Wow.
Based on what the Arabs swore they would do.
Wow. That's crazy.
Okay, go ahead.
gardens. Massive parks were prepared in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other cities in case the cemeteries would have no more space. World governments, instead of defending Israel's right to exist, warned Israel continuously not to attack. However, the people of Israel had no choice but to go to war, to defend their country and their very existence. At 7:15 a.m. on June 5th, 1967, the IDF launched Operation Moked, Focus. Almost the entire Israeli Air Force was dispatched in a daring mission. Only 12 planes stayed behind. The risk of this operation was extraordinary.
Now listen to this
pilots
close.
flew at an unprecedented low altitude of less than 20 meters above the ground. Egypt had the most advanced ground-air missile defense systems in the Middle East. Most of the Israeli jets were old and outdated French planes. If the Israeli jets would have been detected, many would have fallen, and Israel would have been left with practically no air force. And then, a miracle occurred. The most advanced Russian MiG jets that patrolled the airspace along the borders between Egypt and Israel were, for that one critical hour, grounded. Incredibly, at that very same time, the top commanders of Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq flew together to observe the Egyptian forces invading Sinai. The Egyptian officers had ordered all anti-aircraft units not to fire unless given a direct order as long as they were in flight. This created total confusion on the Egyptian ground as Israel struck exactly in that window of time. By
They didn't know this.
7:05 a.m.
So they didn't know that the
Israelis did not know this.
They didn't know that the Egyptian high command was in the air, so that their fighter planes would have free reign to fly through there because of orders that have been given to anti-aircraft Muslim
Right.
attack
Muslim
forces.
brothers, right.
Wow.
The high hand of Providence resulted in the Israeli Air Force reaching all the Egyptian airfields without even one plane being detected. More than 200 Egyptian planes, almost half of Egypt's fleets, were almost instantaneously destroyed, also bombing the runways and making impotent the mightiest air force in the Middle East. General Moti Hod, commander of the Air Force, said, "In my wildest dreams, I never would have conceived of such an incredible success." A second wave of Israeli jets.
I'm just going to say to this, not my dad, but I will. So I'll check. I'll check my whatchamacallit. Not to excess, but definitely take a couple of shots for sure.
Were directed to Cairo to confront the remains of the Egyptian Air Force. And here, another miracle occurred, no less miraculous than the first. Even though Israel had lost the element of surprise and the anti-aircraft systems were operating with full capacity, Egypt was only able to hit one Israeli plane. The Israeli Air Force went on to destroy a total of more than 300 Egyptian planes, and every airfield in Egypt was neutralized. It was nothing less than a military miracle, seemingly impossible. And then, another miracle occurred. It was as if God hardened the heart of the Egyptian president Nasser, who continuously gloated about his glorious military victory over Israel. In the Arab media, President Nasser spoke of the end of Israel's air force and of the Egyptian tanks on their way to Jerusalem.
Freeze this,
Jordan,
please. I want to
Syria, and
comment.
Iraq believed these.
I remember this because I heard this not in Arabic. I didn't have a way of receiving the Arabic at that time. But I remember hearing on the radio, on the news, what Nasser is announcing. And they announced it as a fact. They said the Haifa oil refineries are in flames. Tanks are moving on Jerusalem. The Israelis are in retreat. And I remember crying and thinking, oh, wow, oh, terrible. What's going to happen over there? What's going to be over there? I remember thinking this. And I also remember, which we're going to see now, a very interesting thing. So why did this happen? Why did Nasser do this? It wasn't that he was crazy. Nasser wanted Jordan to come in because he knew he needed Jordanian assistance to win the war. So he lied And he had what's called the Saut al-Arab, the voice of the Arabs in Cairo, which was the strongest broadcasting station in the whole area. And he's announcing over there all of these lies in order to get Hussein, the king.
What lies was he announcing?
The lies that the Haifa being in flames, that the Arab armies are marching on Jerusalem, that the Israeli Air Force is being defeated.
Kind of like reports we hear about the war in Ukraine.
Right.
Sorry.
No, I can't comment. I don't know.
I'm kidding. It's a joke.
I know. All right. Okay. All right. I don't know. All right. Anyway, I don't know really what's happening. I know what I read, but I don't believe it. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. The bottom line is that is going to convince Hussein to come in. And that turns out to be a miracle. And you'll see what in a minute, of course. Why? Go ahead.
All right. And by the way, I got the email. Thank you, Brandon.
Bombastic statements and wanted to join in the great victory against the Jews. All the Arab air power struck simultaneously on multiple fronts. In almost any other scenario, Israel would not have been able to respond as quickly as it did. The timing was seemingly orchestrated to position Israeli jets exactly where they should be. Not in 6 days, but in 6 hours, the war was won.
A biblical prophecy comes to pass as the forces of Israel sweep on in an astonishing triumph of strategy. After achieving air supremacy,
Moshe Dayan.
their forces thrust like an avenging sword at the very heart of Arab self-confidence.
And then, perhaps, the greatest miracle of all, a miracle Israel never expected: Jerusalem. Again, it seemed as though it was a divine appointment in time. Jerusalem was to be restored to the Jewish people after 2,000 years. The enemies of Israel had twice as many soldiers as we did, 3 times as many planes, 4 times as many tanks. The odds were stacked against us on every military front. The love of Israel, self-sacrifice, and courage of the Israeli soldiers, combined with divine guidance and assistance, made these miracles possible. Yitzhak Rabin, then the Minister of Defense, was given the honor of giving the war its name. He chose the 6-day war, recalling the 6 days of creation, as Israel too was created with the liberation of Jerusalem.
I never knew that the reason it was called the 6-day war was a reference to Genesis. I had no idea. Was that something everyone knew?
No, most people don't know this.
No, because I'm wondering if that was like a famous thing for people who were alive in 1960. I was born in 1970, so I'm just.
You have to understand also that Rabin was not known for religion, but this is all right. This is basically what I wanted to show.
Do you want me to go further, or should I stop here?
No, I think it's enough. This is enough. I mean, the rest is more political. So, okay, now. I wanted to comment about a couple of things regarding this. This whole scenario, and by the way, to take Jerusalem, that was the bloodiest battle of all. I know that Good Lawgic has been there, and I've taken his children there. There's a place called the Ammunition Hill, which was really very heavily fortified, and the fear was the Jordanians would come down from that into the city and would murder people. There is a head of a rabbinical academy, which I've been working on and off for many decades. And I don't know. Whatever. All right. Yeah. There's only a few of my books. I have more than this. All right. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. But I wish I knew what's in them. I really don't know everything in them at all. I wish I knew half what's in them. All right. But anyway, the bottom line is that this is the story that this gentleman said, because he was a student in Jerusalem near this Ammunition Hill.
Who's this person we're talking about?
Robert Faskowitz. All right. He was a student there, and this is what he said. He said, we were scared. All the Israeli boys have been given jobs outside of the area for the army. There were a bunch of old women. All men were involved in some defensive preparations. I was there with some old women and a couple of American boys. We were the American boys. 2 or 3, half dozen, whatever. And suddenly in comes a brigadier general. And the brigadier general looks at us and he sees who's here. We're in a shelter there. And this is the comment he makes. He says, look, we can't give you guns. We don't have any to spare. He said, the Jordanian soldiers may break through. If they do, you can expect they'll murder every man, woman, and child in this room. And then he takes a bayonet and he goes over to a wooden table and he cuts off the leg of the table. He takes the bayonet and he sharpens the bayonet into a point. The table leg into a point. And he gives it to one of the young men. I don't know, maybe this gentleman or someone else. He says, listen to me. When the first Jordanian comes through this door, try to stick him in the belly with this table leg, which he sharpened into like a sort of a pointed small spear.
A stake.
And then grab his gun and try to shoot the others.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. That's how bad it was. I want to
plan
make this clear.
We're not going to give you. We're not going to give you we can't afford to give you a single gun. So the plan is that you guys are going to jump the first.
Try to jump the Jordanian. The armed, trained Jordanian soldier is going to come in here.
You Talmudic students should jump the Jordanian soldier, stab him with this wooden stake, and
grab his gun and shoot
his gun. And shoot for the first time in your lives, probably, and kill everyone, all the other soldiers who come in there. That's the game plan. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how it was. People don't remember this.
Just like
but
how
I will tell you.
You're saying just how terrifying it was because they just weren't sure they could even
for
hold
more than a decade. The Arabs remembered for more than a decade. They don't remember now, but they remembered that. So now I explain. 1978, for the first time, I came to Israel. I won a sabbatical and I went to Israel. And I wanted to get Arabic history books because it's my interest. Books in Arabic, original sources that are printed up. So I was told that in Hebron, that I can go to the Dandi's bookstore. So I know I can chat with these guys, but I'm a little concerned to go in. So I'm introduced to, then the prime minister was Menachem Begin, and I'm introduced to his expert on Arab affairs, Ma'oz, I believe his name was, Moshe Ma'oz. And he said, listen, you can go there. I said, I can walk into Hebron, it's a Hebrew word for that place. I can walk in there, and there'll be no trouble. There's no trouble. The Arabs are afraid. They won't bother you. You can walk around. Nothing will happen to you. And I did, and I had more trouble arguing with the Jewish cab driver who tried to overcharge me for bringing the books back than I had when I was dealing with the Arabs. That's how it was. Because why? Because the Arabs were afraid. When the Arabs were afraid, they behaved. Sadat, when he made the peace accords, those peace accords, and he got back to Sinai and he made a deal and he recognized Israel. He did it because he was told after the 73 war, which they tried again and they lost. And that was a tremendously bloody battle on the Golan with the Syrians. Sadat knew they couldn't defeat the Israelis. He knew that, I forget, it's the 3rd or 6th Army was trapped in the desert by the Israelis, and they could have been annihilated completely, but the Israelis don't do that. They don't annihilate people that are been rendered ineffective. That's not how they are. They only annihilate those that are out to fight or able to fight and out to get them. So what occurred was that Sadat made peace. And of course, the message loud and clear is don't make peace. He's murdered. He's assassinated 4 years later. But the bottom line is, this is what's been going on.
I will say this. You know, when the peace accords, that was Camp David, right?
Correct.
So when the Camp David peace accords were signed in 1978, I remember it was in March of 1978. I think my cousin was actually born the day the peace accords were signed. as I recall, Meir was born on that day. And I remember the speculation was that there's no way to trust the Egyptians. They're going to break the accord. They're going to break it. And to their credit, you know,
They never did.
It's been, and I mean this sincerely, it's been 45 years, and they've never stepped over that line. They gave them the Sinai, which we went to the Sinai. It was 1979 is when it was, because we were there in 78. So, and we went down to Sharm el Sheikh. The first time I was in Israel was with my dad when I was 8 years old. And I'll give you a little personal story here. I'm going to start with the L'chaim, though, because Let's Go Brandon sent a little birthday L'chaim for you. So I'm going to say L'chaim, Chaim Tov Shalom. Happy birthday to you, Dad. And thank you, Let's Go Brandon. Peace. So I remember, so it must have been 79. That is when the peace accord was signed, because we were in the Sinai in 78. And I remember we drove down to Sharm el Sheikh, which was at the very southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. And I don't know how you remember this. I remember because I got heat exhaustion. I don't know if you remember. I got very, very sick.
Yes.
Crazy high fever.
That was not on the ride. That was afterwards in a lot. You had heat exhaustion, and I hiked over to see about getting medicine, and I was told to get you ice, which I did in the bar. It was a whole thing. Yeah, I remember.
I was burning up. Yeah, we had gone on on a tour with Pesach Levy, and had gone around a lot in various sites. And I think that's where we had gone on a tour. That's my recollection. It might have been someone else, but we had gone on touring around a lot. But we also went down to Sharm el Sheikh, and I remember there was that incident with the liver with the when we went down to
let's
that
not go through this here. It's not the place for that. Yes.
Okay. Okay. But anyway, but so what was interesting is, it was only 6 months later that they gave away the Sinai Peninsula. And obviously, that's been...
Well, that was because Israel really wanted peace. They also, the Sinai Peninsula is not part of historic Israel. And there were no Jews there. And there was no real reason to keep it if there's real peace.
Mm-hmm.
And the Egyptians wanted it back. There's a concept, I'm sure I mentioned this on here before, but to refresh people's minds, or maybe the people didn't hear before. There's a Bedouin concept. It's called asabiya in Arabic. The only way to try to render it into English is to call it manly pride. And the Arabs historically developed this, even the ones that are not Bedouin. It means saving face in English, I guess, also. They wanted to save face. Sadat was allowed to save face. Why? Because soldiers in that army that was trapped didn't know they were trapped. The generals didn't tell them they're trapped, but Sadat knew and the generals knew.
What do you mean they didn't know they were trapped? What do you mean?
The army was surrounded by the Israelis, and they could have been obliterated.
So how did they not realize they're surrounded?
The generals knew, but the average soldier didn't know.
They couldn't see that they're surrounded, or there was
no. It was in the desert. They were surrounded, and the Israelis had heavy equipment and heavy weapons. They did not have, and they did not know.
That's interesting.
Let me tell you. In 75, I'm going to make this point. In 75, I went to Egypt. In terms of the average soldier, the average low-ranking soldier, not the officers, the low-ranking soldiers, I was told that I would like to visit. I went there. I was there a month. Can visit a school to combat illiteracy. And in the school, they had soldiers from the army. And I'm in a classroom. And I'm sitting here a little further I am from the books. There's a blackboard. And the instructor writes on the board in Arabic. He writes Ahmed or some name, I don't remember. Went to school yesterday. And of course, I read it right away. And then he has, okay, who's going to read it? I'm not saying in Arabic, I'll say it in English. Guy gets up and he goes, Ahmad went to school yesterday, like that. That's how long it took him to read that. And they had other stuff, and they were reading. Most of the Egyptian soldiers were peasants. They were illiterate. They couldn't read. They didn't know what was going on altogether. The newspapers and everything praised the great victory. I went into a house, which was a hovel, means it's terrible, poor, falling down. And a guy walks over to us. It was a group of professors, and the guy walks over, and this is the comment: "You know, we won the war. In this war 2 years ago, like this." So he
Are you
has
talking about the War of 73?
paper. He cut out the words in Arabic, Allah Akbar, God is the greatest. And he stuck them on the wall. I mean, it was a dirt wall practically. It looked like a dirt wall.
Right.
A hovel. A real
You're
hovel.
saying they were very ignorant of everything. They were kept in
them
the
were
dark.
very ignorant, very poor, and whatever they're told, they were told. I mean, we won the war.
To your knowledge, has the Egyptian education system developed since then?
I think so. Yeah, from what I've seen, it's not like that today. It is better today. That was really pathetic.
Wow.
Remember something else. Nasser was a socialist. He kept people ignorant, so they didn't know how bad it was. If you're ignorant, you don't know how bad it is. He's not the first one to do this. All right. Anyway.
All right. Winter Soldier sends a Rumble rant saying Great Lawgic is the best Rumble ghetto. You're not in the ghetto. You're not in the ghetto.
Ghetto.
And we got.
I'm not in the ghetto. A week ago or 10 days ago, I was in. Hi. Thank you, Pam. I appreciate you helping out the chat. Thank you very much.
Do you hear the sound effects?
The
Are the sound effects coming through to you? Did you hear the sound effect just now?
Me? A little bit. Very low. You sound low too, by the way.
Huh.
And I don't think it's my hearing. You sound low.
All right.
Anyway.
Oh, and Dina says, I need a good Jewish man. Thanks from Korea. It's not hard. It's not easy to find a good Jewish man.
Thank you very much, Dina.
Thank you. And
I have a cousin who's an Israeli who spells her Hebrew name in English, Deena, Dina.
There you go.
Yeah. Right.
There you
That's
go.
how she spells it. I sent her emails to that anyway sometimes.
Hold on a second.
Uh-huh.
No more shots, please. I'd like to hear your father. Please ignore Let's Go Brandon. His stupid shot request. Respect yourself. I do respect myself, and he respects me as well. You're misinterpreting Rafe. It's just it's a warm regard, and I'm not going to get roasted here or toasted or anything of that nature.
I don't like
so you don't have to worry about that.
All right. But, anyway,
I definitely don't qualify his shot requests as stupid.
I
thank him as being a very big supporter of the show.
I'm funny. I'm strange. When I was about 18, my father, may rest in peace, said to me, you should learn to drink. People expect you to drink. So I said, why do I have to learn to drink? People expect? I said, if I learn to drink, two things. One, I don't like. First of all, I didn't like it. Second of all, if I do like it, that's going to cost me money, and I might, God forbid, become an alcoholic. So therefore, why do I have to learn to drink? And I never learned to drink. Occasionally, I'll have a drink, meaning about 1/8 of an inch in the bottom of a shot glass. To me, that's a drink.
Right.
So, all right. Anyway, let's go back to the topic now. So we have here now. I want to get along to what's going on. Iran is not. I'm going to talk about Iran, but first, what Iran has done outside Iran, and I'm very concerned about this because Iran wants to destroy Israel. This is the truth. There's no question about it. I take them at their word on this. They're a fundamentalist government, and in fact, I pray that the government should be overthrown. I pray for that. And we had the chance to do this under a previous administration. There was a lot of trouble going on there. And instead of sending the CIA to foment more trouble, the leader then didn't do it. And let's put it this way, it wasn't Trump, the leader. All right. Anyway, the bottom line is, though, Iran...
The Biden administration take to reign in Iran?
Yeah. Now, the Biden administration gave Iran, I believe, I saw a heading, $1.4 billion. So now I took a few minutes. I didn't find exactly what I wanted. Are you all right? I see you talking.
Yeah, I
Good logic.
apologize. Yeah, I apologize for that. Yeah, I'm going to pull up a story about that. If we're going to start talking about the whole Iran situation.
Well,
so
I will in a minute, but first, give me a minute more.
Okay.
All right. I spent about 15 minutes looking up to see how much drones cost, military drones, and how much automatic weapons cost. You know how many drones and how many automatic weapons you can buy with $1.4 billion? Or if the boycott is working and the government is being destabilized and there could be a revolution overthrowing those characters, wonderful. But if they get 1.4 billion, they can use some of that money to assuage the problems.
To buy themselves some peace. Yeah.
Biden's government made a tragic mistake in giving them anything.
Well,
it is a tragic error. My entire life, I have studied this area. It is a big mistake.
Let's talk about exactly what's happening here. I'm going to pull up a couple of articles about that, and then I'll get your feedback about what's going on in Iran. Okay.
All right.
So, the headline here. This is back from last week when you first brought this to my attention. Biden administration under fire for Iran nuke and hostage deal that could net regime billions. State sponsor.
That's
terrorism.
More than one.
Iran reportedly stands to gain $17 billion in the new deal. The Biden administration is facing intense criticism for its repeated willingness to pump $17 billion into the coffers of the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism, the Islamic Republic of Iran, to reach a controversial deal to impose temporary restrictions on Iran's illicit nuclear program and secure the release of American hostages. It's like no one talks about these American hostages. We never hear about these American hostages. But it's like, yeah, we're just going to start funneling money over to them. Quote, when Joe Biden was elected...
May I interrupt you?
Please do.
I want to make a comment. And this may sound very disparate and far off, but historians tend to look for parallels. For a century and a half before the Roman Empire fell, they were buying off the barbarians. We don't need to buy off Iran. There is no reason to buy off Iran.
If you have any questions about history,
demand.
Any questions about history, yes, Middle East for sure. He can tell you what you want to know. Any questions about history?
Well, not quite, but anyway.
He's going to know. He'll likely know more than most people you can ask. But speaking of which, someone asked, if you have a question you want to ask, feel free to drop a chat and I'll try to get an answer.
The answer to her $2 thing is I doubt it.
You don't think Sadat's murder was a setup by Mubarak?
I doubt it. No,
I don't think it's a her. I think it's a he.
Fundamentalist because he made peace with Israel and Islambuli. And by the way, this government that we're saving now, when Islambuli was arrested, and of course he's going to be executed, right, for doing this, this Iranian government under his predecessor, Khomeini, who led the revolution, just before he died. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. It was after he died. It was under Khomeini, who is now the ruler, still the ruler from 79 on. When this Islambuli was being executed, they showed Islambuli in jail, the picture of him behind bars with blood, and they said, praising Islambuli, who murdered Sadat, who made peace. This is an Iranian stamp, who made peace with Israel. This is this regime that Biden is now helping to prop up.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the story. Quote, when Joe Biden was elected, Iran's nuclear program was in a box and their economy was in a downward spiral, Senator Ted Cruz in Texas told Fox News Digital. Biden looked the other way as the Ayatollah steadily advanced to nuclear weapons and the regime resumed exports of millions of barrels of oil a day.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Now, just this comment. There was another president, we will not mention his name, who commented that ISIS was junior varsity just when it was bursting out in the Middle East. And by the way, it's just been released recently.
You're talking about Obama?
Yeah, I didn't want to say the name, but yes.
Why not? We can name names. We'll name names.
Okay, well, it was President Obama. Okay,
yeah.
Wait, listen to this. Just 3 weeks ago, it was released that the Shin Bet, these Israeli security, they located the leaders and the main forces of ISIS and they took them out.
When was that?
When ISIS fell in about 16, 17.
Uh-huh.
Israel took them out.
I thought it was that when Trump killed al-Baghdadi and Soleimani,
He killed him and he got the credit, but Israel took out a lot of the others.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's being released now.
Mm-hmm. No, because I've regularly been crediting Trump for wiping out ISIS, which became
they worked in consonance with Trump.
And people forget today what a threat ISIS became while Obama was sitting as the leader of the free world. I mean, they grew from being nothing into, like, all of a sudden they're sweeping through the Levant and beheading journalists and imposing Sharia law in the most brutal interpretation thereof.
Yeah, they burned the Jordanian pilot alive. They showed images of 8-year-olds cutting the throats of prisoners.
Yeah, they were
They
really
raped the
brutal.
Yazidi Christian women.
Yeah.
Oh, we can go on and on, and on.
And that all developed under Obama's watch. And Trump never gets any credit. People were terrified of them taking over the entire Levant, which is a reference to the whole Persian Gulf area. And they're dead. They're gone. I mean, they're history now. And I've been crediting Trump with that. And still people say, I don't really like his farm. He didn't lose a single American life, didn't go to war and wiped out ISIS. Like, for that alone, he's one of the 10 greatest presidents ever. But anyway, so all the while, Iran became Putin's #1 military backer. Biden has already been funding both sides of the war in Ukraine, and so it would be appalling, but unsurprising if he started openly sending billions more to the Ayatollah. Cruz's criticism of Biden's Iran policy follows a report in Iran International, a Washington, D.C.-based independent news organization, that a deal might be imminent between the U.S. and Tehran over sanctions. In exchange for economic incentives reported to be $17 billion for the clerical regime, the rulers of Iran would release 3 American hostages just at a rate of $5.7 billion apiece. 3 American hostages and freeze certain aspects of their alleged nuclear weapons work. Okay. According to the Iran International Report, funds for Iraqi banks totaling as much as $10 billion or more could be funneled to Iran and would be linked to restrictions on Tehran's illegal atomic program. Oh, so you can only use this money as long as it's not for nuclear.
It's so ridiculous. Money is fungible. Excuse me. I want to make there was a quote from
they're supposed to limit the way the assets are coming in. So, I mean, in this article, they say that they're going to be giving them Iraqi dinars. Iraq purchases electricity and natural gas from Tehran, but is prohibited by U.S. sanctions from transferring dollar payments to Iran. Iraq is only permitted to transfer funds to Iran in Iraqi dinars.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Money is fungible.
Yeah.
Look, I want to say something about this.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of freeing the hostages. First of all, obviously, I'm glad hostages are being freed. I'm nothing, God forbid that I should not be. But Golda Meir was the premier of Israel, and I forget his name. Unfortunately, there was a boy was kidnapped by the Arabs, and they were campaigning outside the prime minister's office. Golda Meir should give them what they wanted, which was to free a whole bunch of bad guys. And Golda Meir made the following statement. If it were my son, I'd be out there on the picket line. But I'm the premier of Israel. We can't do it.
Because if you negotiate with terrorists,
don't negotiate with terrorists.
You are begging.
I've said it on this show before.
You are
The Russians. No one hurts the Russians. You know why? I told this before. I'll repeat it again.
Oh, sorry, that's my
Pam.
Pam, Dad, you're amazing for the wedding. Oh, joy,
Thank you.
as
Oh
well.
boy, that's super
Thank you very much,
sweet.
Pam. Yeah.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
3 Russians kidnapped by one of the. I might have been the Izzuddin Brigade, or portion of them. They were kidnapped. So what? They demanded freeing a bunch of terrorists. the Russians found out the leader of the group. They found his brother. They sent the privy parts of the brother to the leader of the group, after they, of course, had removed his life. And then that was their response, sending the privy parts to the leader.
You say when the Russian
3 Russians were kidnapped.
I think it was 4.
But I believe it was 3. I'm not sure. All right.
But there were 3 members of the Russian embassy who were taken hostages. Do you remember who took them hostages?
I don't remember. I'm not sure.
Right.
You're looking it up, you find it, good.
It's not an easy story to find.
All right, but anyway, this is what happened. I'm telling you again. They killed the brother of the leader of the terrorist group. And they castrated him post-mortem, and they sent the castration pieces to the terrorists.
The bus circumcision
was the terrorists killed one of the captives because it was blood for blood, released the other 2, and they've never, ever, ever kidnapped any Russians again.
Yep. All they got to do
works.
Right. Seriously.
That works.
And you know how Biden is such a big fan of, like, gender health care. You just got to give gender health care to one of their to some sibling of some terrorist, and boom, voila. You get your 3 hostages back, save $17 billion. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm telling you, this is what you're dealing with here. Yeah. Iran is very dangerous. They are very dangerous. If they have nuclear weapons, there will be a war, I believe. And they may try, they're trying to get missiles they can reach here. I mentioned before this fellow, Said al-Qutb, whom they all look up to, all the extremists. Is a little quiet man who came to America in 1948 and was totally appalled, came back to Egypt, wrote a lot of things, and by the way, his name, Qutb, means extreme end, pole, P-O-L-E, like the poles, and North Pole, South Pole. That's one of the meanings of Qutb. So anyway, this Qutb was later executed by NASA for being too extremist. In any event, he is the one of the, shall we say, the people who is extolled by the Muslim Brotherhood, by a lot of the people that want to bring down America and end Western civilization as we know it.
Yeah. Well, let me get through to this story, and I also have one more updated story. So because this is from last week. I'm almost done with this story here. So Iran's ambassador to Iraq, Mohammad Kazem
Sada.
Thank you. Gesundheit told an Iraqi news outlet that this year that Iraq owes Iran $11 billion for imports of gas and electricity. South Korea purchased $7 billion in Iranian oil prior to the imposition of comprehensive energy sanctions on Iran in 2019. The money is being held by South Korea. When asked about the Iran International Report and a new deal with Iran's regime, a State Department spokesman did not deny the report. Quote, "Make no mistake, the United States of America will protect and defend its citizens." No, this is not protecting and defending. This is inviting them to take more hostages. That's all this does. Because you basically say every American is worth $5 billion to us. The spokesperson told Fox News Digital, to that end, we remain committed to securing the freedom of all U.S. nationals who continue to be wrongfully detained overseas, and we are working relentlessly to bring all wrongful detained nationals home.
Look.
We will not stop until they are reunited.
Do you see me?
Yeah. What is that?
Look, it's a great statement.
Yeah.
The Biden administration is excellent at making great statements.
Yeah.
They make wonderful statements. But in the Middle East, what is accepted, or I should say respected, is force. Force. And everything I have seen, 60 years or more than that, 65 years almost, I am studying the history of this area. Force is what they accept and respect. And anything, and once they know you'll do it and you can do it, they will bow. And that's why I was able to walk through Hebron in 1978.
And I know
Israeli force.
And I want to be clear. This is one of the things where I think one of the biggest mistakes that people tend to make is that we tend, and I've talked about this before when I had you on the show, but I haven't had you on very much over the last year or so. So I want to just remind my audience of this. There are just cultural differences,
Right.
that
Exactly.
between West and East and Middle East, which they're just not the same in their philosophies as to what is something that garners is worthy of
totally different there.
What's
And when
worthy of
you're dealing
respect,
with them, you got to deal with them on their terms.
and what's not worthy of respect. And if you work in your own terms, as far as like, well, this is how I would respond to it, and you don't realize how much of your mindset is influenced by a Judeo-Christian mindset of, like, you know, forgiveness and mercy and kindness, which is a very different philosophy from Middle Eastern or Eastern. And that's not to say that a Western mindset is superior to a Middle Eastern mindset or to an Eastern mindset.
We're not evaluating. We're talking about pragmatically dealing with these guys.
Right.
That's
so,
what it is.
And there are certain ways. I mean, I gave another example of a distinction. Okay, that, you know, in the Middle East, you know, when you go shopping, and in the shuk, which is what they call the marketplace, and this is not just Arabs. This is in the Israeli shuk also. There's an expectation that everyone who goes into a shop there where wares are being sold understand that the price that's on the ticket is not the price they're going to sell it for. So they will basically mark something up by 800% over what they anticipate selling it for. And you go in there and they expect you're going to make an offer. And they'll tell them, you know, you express some level of interest, not say hey, you desperately need it. You're going to express some level of interest. You're going to make an offer. They're going to laugh at you no matter how good your offer is. Even if your offer is too stupidly high, like you offered half what was on the ticket and they were planning on selling it for 20 to 25%, but they'll still say, no, that's way too low. I'll go out of business if I sell it so cheap, get out of here. And they're expecting that you're going to have a back and forth. And the philosophy behind that, there's actually logic to it, because what happens in this type of setting, this back and forth, is the buyer and seller are now coming to a price based on what they're willing to part with, and in exchange for the goods, are willing to accept in exchange for the goods. And the buyer feels, I got a bargain. It's supposed to be for X, and I got it for 30%, 40%, or 70% off of X, and I feel like I got a bargain. And in that sense, the transaction itself becomes part of the reason for the purchase, because you feel a sense of accomplishment that I haggled well with this seller. That is just a cultural mindset. And I jokingly, after I came back from spending a year in Israel, I went into a store like Best Buy, and, you know, I asked, like, how much was a TV, and they said, you know, $1,200, and I was like, I'll give you $550. And the guy looked at me like I was out of my mind. Like, are you crazy? And like, because like in America, that just doesn't happen. It's like, that's the price. You want it, buy it. You don't buy it. It's that simple. But it's like, it's a completely different mindset. Is the Western perspective healthier than the Middle Eastern perspective? I don't know. Maybe not. But the point is, it's just a different way of approaching things. Now, what my father's bringing up here.
There was a print of a painting that my his not his mother, those who don't know, it's my second wife, very close. So this fellow has these prints. They look like paintings. They're G clay, which are very good prints, and he has them advertised for $1,500. I haven't bought anything since Biden came in with the inflation, and so I'm on the phone with this fellow. He goes, it calls me Rabbi. I said, Rabbi Neiman, it's $1,500. I said to him, fine. Adios. Like that. Forget about it. You won't pay. Now, he didn't want me to pay $1,500. He wanted me to pay $1,000. I had paid $600 for this thing, for one of these, not this one. They're different ones. So I said to him, listen, I said, I'm not willing to buy it. Forget about it. You know, there's nothing to talk about at that. We're so far apart. Will you give me $1,000? So right away now, I gave him $50 more because of the inflation. I paid $650.
Right.
That's yeah.
Right. Right.
That's because I know how to do this.
But now
You
when
got to know the system.
Now, when we're talking about like coming to them and negotiating with a terrorist, people think if you display weakness, you're going to get mercy or kindness because that's the way a Western mindset would work. But from everything you told me over the last 5 decades, that's the exact worst strategy that you can display.
The reason I could walk through the streets of Hebron or Hebron was because they were afraid. I could do everything. They have to be afraid. I'm telling you.
And it's not fear because
when Sharon gave them, Premier Ariel Sharon gave back handed over the Gaza Strip for nothing. When that happened, half the country was going crazy because we knew that. I don't understand how. The man was an Israeli, was born in Israel and everything. I don't understand how he was so blinded that he did that. I to this day, I don't. It's 2004. It's almost 2 decades. I don't understand how this happened.
And the point that I think that you're making, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I want my audience to understand, it's not that they're afraid because there are daily beatings. It's that there was a daily beating years ago. There was a beating years ago, like a real pounding at one point, and they just don't want that to happen again. So there's just no friction. It's just like if they feel like you are willing to use force, then you never need to use the force. It's the same way that, when you had to build up a nuclear arms race between Russia and America, it's the existence of having those nuclear weapons, which is why you never need to use the nuclear weapons. You never end up having any type of war. The threat itself is what keeps the peace. And that's the way that I always understood you explaining the Middle East, and with respect to when you were saying like in Hebron that they were afraid, that's the way I always understood you were explaining.
Yeah, right. Okay. When I was I was there again, and more recently, and there's a bust of the cave of the patriarchs, where traditionally Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried, along with Ishmael or Ishmael in Ismail in Arabic. I'm not sure the English. I think is Ishmael. Were buried there. Right, Rogue thought is right, of course. We just to attack, right? I believe, by the way, that if we hadn't run out of Afghanistan with a tail in our legs, you wouldn't have had the Putin invading Ukraine. I don't think you would have had that.
You think Putin saw how we handled Afghanistan and
he figures, the United States is weak, and I need this. This will give me a boost domestically, and I'll march in there, poof, poof, poof. And now to depart with his tail between his legs, so to speak, is very, very not good for him politically. So he's blind over there. What's going on over there? Anyway, that's a whole other. I don't want to start with that, and I don't know that much about that, so I really don't like to get into things I don't know too well.
Reform Congress says,
I admire live in peace.
I admire Israel's efforts to live in peace while constantly being surrounded by enemies, and don't eradicate them even when they must harm. It's as few as possible, even sharing religious sites. God bless.
Thank you, Reformed Convict, for the help and everything else.
And I have a new member of the following. The following is not a cult. I am not a cult leader. It's not at all a cult type of thing. My father would cast me out if I started a cult. So this is very much not a cult type of cult. And there's no squirrels. There's no mutilation of no harming others or self-harm, no spaceships, no tracksuits, no Kool-Aid, nothing of that. It's just a group of people who are interested in a strong community with great unity for the purpose of personal growth. And personal growth is, from my perspective, is one of the most important things as far as actually bringing real happiness. So welcome to the following. And I'm not the leader of the following. I'm another member, just like you. I'm just another leader. Not another member, another mulligan. Yeah, I'm just a member, just like you, who's handsome. Welcome aboard. Marcel DeForest says, so why are the Taliban now posting on the border to Iran? Is it some old tribal thing? Also, Joe, you're your father's child. That's you in 40 years or 28 years, depending on.
He should be healthy and live that long and more years.
Yeah. So, but I take that as the greatest compliment. Thank you, Marcel. So. Can you explain why the Taliban are now posting on the border to Iran?
I don't believe the Taliban would dare to attack Iran. On the contrary, I think they just want to make sure tribally that nobody else gets in there, because Iran is not the enemy of the Taliban. The Taliban are fundamentalists. The Iranian government is fundamentalist, and I don't believe that there's going to be a conflict between them. That doesn't make sense.
So why do you think they'd be why would they be posting on the border?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not. That's not my thing. I understand, but I'm not sure.
Rest of town says haggling is annoying. Every second I haggle, the item gets more expensive because I've now spent additional resources on it in the form of time. Yeah, but if you save $100 in 5 minutes, that's usually a good deal, right?
Right. So, that's what it is.
But I can understand that a lot of people can't stand it, and if you're of a Western mindset and you're not used to it, you feel as if I think a lot of Westerners feel like they hate haggling because they feel as if no matter what they end up buying for it, they probably overpaid. That's also that they probably didn't get it down as far as they could have, so they feel like they lost in the haggling.
You could argue that it's because of the climate or whatever, but life there is slower still than here. Life is slower. Malesh, let it go. Don't worry about it. Mafish, what's in it? You know, these are common expressions. Literally, mafishai, which is mafish. What's in that thing? I mean, these are expressions. They're very common kind of things. I mean, there's a joke that's told about, not about the Middle East. It's told about some Hasidim who generally don't worry about time, and Germans who are very, very careful on time. And there was an intermarriage, Jewish intermarriage, between a German Jew and a Hasidist, a girl from this Hasidic background. And the joke goes that the wedding, they were calling the wedding for 6:30, so they sent an invitation to the Germans 6:30, and for the Hasidim, her families, 5:45. Hoping they show up.
Hasidic Jews are show up notoriously late too.
So, and of course, in the joke, Hasidim said, "Oh, she's marrying a German, so we got to be there at 5:45." And the German said, "Oh, he's marrying this Hasidim. They come late. They came at 7." So that's the joke. That the twain didn't meet. But the bottom of all of this is that in the Middle East, it's okay, and you exaggerate, you praise someone more than he is worth. This and that culture. This is how it works often, very often.
Grinsbar says Afghanistan seems like a weapons launder event.
Could be, could be.
Billy Aoki says no mutilations. What about yesterday's circumcision party? Well, it was not yesterday. It was on Saturday.
It's not mutilation, surgery in order to. And by the way, although that's not why we do it, there is a statistical correlation between the absence of the foreskin and the lack of what?
You don't want to.
What?
You're going to say that it's healthier to not have foreskin.
Let me explain why.
I know. Okay. I'll let you explain it.
A diminution of whatchamacallit, vaginal cancer among partners, women. And the theory is that the foreskin area contains certain microbes which can cause that cancer. I read this 30 years ago. I read it now. Maybe it's changed. 30 years ago, I read this. 20
All
years
right,
ago.
let's get back. Let me get back to whatchamacallit. The United States should never spend one penny in ransom on payments to the world's leading state-sponsored terrorism, noted former State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus, who served during the Trump administration. Secretary Pompeo and President Trump brought 2 Americans home from Iranian prison without paying a cent. Giving Iran billions of dollars will only incentivize more hostage-taking and lead more Americans and their families to suffer and fuel more Iranian terrorism.
Whoever wrote this, if it were an essay, I were grading it, would get an A. Who is that?
That is Morgan. That's Morgan Ortagus who made that statement.
Then, right, yeah, right.
that we shouldn't be paying off terrorists. President Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in 2018 because his administration argued it did not stop Tehran from building nuclear weapons and continues to permit Iran to fund terrorism and develop long-range missiles. The State Department under both Republican and Democratic administrations has classified Iran's regime as the world's top state sponsor of terrorism. That was a week ago. And today, the New York Post is reporting, I don't want this here. The New York Post is reporting, sorry about that. Biden administration quietly revives talks with Iran. This came out this afternoon. The White House has restarted talks with Iran in an effort to win the release of U.S. detainees and limit Tehran's nuclear program. Biden administration officials have traveled to Oman for indirect discussions with the Iranian counterparts at least 3 times since December, when senior U.S. and Iranian diplomats made contact in New York, the Wall Street Journal reported Wednesday. A month earlier, President Biden told a group of Iranian-American protesters in California that the 2015 nuclear deal among the U.S., Iran, and 5 other world powers was dead, but we're not going to announce it. Weeks after that, Robert Malley, the State Department special envoy for Iran, conferred with Tehran's ambassador to the UN, according to the journal. Between February and May, Omani officials reportedly relayed correspondence between Brett McGurk, the National Security Council's top official dealing with the Middle East and North Africa, and Ali Bagheri Khani, Iran's top negotiator on nuclear matters. Malley traveled to Oman during that time as well, according to the journal.
How can the United States have a spine if its leader does not?
That's the eternal question.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
Again, I don't want to say
it's not just its leader, but I mean his role is his
the
primary
leader
role.
Appoints all the others.
Yeah, but his primary role, people forget this. His constitutional primary role is to serve as, the overseer for our international relations. I mean, that's what his role. That's what the president's role is. A lot of people mistakenly think that our government, one of the primary roles of our government is to maintain our economy. There's nothing in the Constitution about that. But you
want to get elected, you have to do it.
And I was about to say that while it's true, the American people tend to blame or credit the economy to the president of the United States and our congressional leaders. The reality is, if you look at what they're supposed to be doing, they're not supposed to be tinkering with the economy. The president is supposed to be dealing with international affairs and overseeing that and serving as the head of the executive branch. But and he has he's neutered himself by the way he handled Afghanistan, completely neutered himself as far as being an effectual world leader. So, a lot of people say, oh, Trump was hostile, he was belligerent. He was exactly the scary force that would stop a Putin or Iran from getting aggressive because he's a wild card, because you don't know what he's going to do. That element to him, which makes Americans on the left so furious with him, is precisely why he was so effective in the role that he was tasked to carry out. Because of what my father was saying, that he basically serves his craziness, or at least his reputation. Not that I think he is really crazy, but his reputation that he can fly off the handle and potentially harm someone is the perfect deterrence, which is why he was the first world leader in the last 40 years to start no new wars, because he alone is the deterrence. In addition, Omani Sultan...
Don't get him angry. You don't know what he'll do.
Yeah.
That was the concept. Mm-hmm. And he can do a lot.
In addition, Omani Sultan Haytham bin Tariq met with Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in Tehran late last month. Iran is seeking to regain access to billions of dollars that have been frozen by U.S. sanctions, potentially in exchange for concessions on its American prisoners and nuclear ambitions. In recent weeks, the U.S. approved a payment roughly $2.7 billion. You said 1.4.
I had seen 1.4. This is another one.
Yeah, this is as of today. $2.7 billion to Iran by Iraq for electricity and gas imports, according to the journal. Though Washington officials say the transfer was not connected to the revived talks.
So why did we do it?
I don't know.
Why did we do it?
I don't know. It's like we didn't even gain anything out of it. We just like, oh, okay, here's $2.7 billion. It's so stupid because if anything, it's like, you know, and that's the whole thing as far as showing weakness that you basically said. It's like all you're doing is you're encouraging them, whatever concessions you would get that they might actually live up to, you're basically encouraging them to never give those concessions, because if they wait another 6 months, then you'll throw them another bone to try and make them happy without any concessions.
I'm going to give you a totally unrelated example. And I just read this recently. In ancient Rome, during a period where there's a lot of confusion, this is the period around 60 years before the Common Era. Now, there's a lot of confusion. So wealthy people had bodyguards. You know which bodyguards carried the most weight? Literally, the ones that were the biggest and the strongest came from Britain. They were from Britain. And the wealthy ones bought them because they're so burly that they scared everybody, and nobody gave them a hard time generally. If you had those bodyguards, they were much better than the smaller bodyguards from other areas.
Yeah, no doubt.
Again, the one who can be the bully, people stay away from the bully. Yeah. And Mr. Nice Guy gets it. Yeah. Politically. I'm talking now, you know, in terms of state situations.
In addition, Omani Sultan Atham bin Tariq, Iran also has sought access to $7 billion in funds held up in South Korea.
Anyway, that's how it's pronounced. All right.
What was that? How does it pronounce?
I was reading the name for you, that's all.
Well, thank you.
Ibn Tariq. Yeah. Ibn Tariq or Ibn Tariq. Right. Okay. Bin is short for Ibn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Relations between Iran and the U.S. have grown increasingly tense over the last year as Tehran captured oil tankers in the Persian Gulf and supplied Russia with drones for use in its invasion of Ukraine. I didn't even know about this. Did you know that?
Yes, yeah. I think the Navy should have shelled their ships. That's what I would have ordered if I were in the White House.
Last fall, the U.S. joined a chorus of foreign nations vehemently condemning Iran as it cracked down on mass protests in response to the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini following her detention by the country's notorious morality police. Iran is believed to have ramped up its nuclear activity after the Trump administration began tightening sanctions back in 2018. This includes amassing sufficient nuclear material to construct weapons, according to U.S. officials.
They should have been taken out. We should have sent missiles and blown them to Kingdom Come. I mean, should have done that.
Biden is facing domestic...
And then they'd be terrified. They would be terrified if we had done that. They'll scream at you like everything, and they'll scream, if you do it, we'll do this and this and this. The bottom line is, you've done it, they would be terrified.
It's a situation where you really want to shoot first and then ask questions later, or answer questions later. Biden is facing domestic...
With them, not generally.
Right.
With them.
Biden is facing domestic political pressure as the 2024 election cycle heats up to not appear weak against foreign adversaries such as Iran. And he feels like this is a good way to avoid that. Internationally, Biden also has to contend with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has kept the use of military force to respond to nuclear Iran on the table. Netanyahu has been reportedly acknowledging the U.S. ambition for a mini deal with Iran and downplayed the ramifications of such a breakthrough, underscoring that isn't the deal we knew that was brokered in 2015. What's on the agenda at the moment, according to Washington and Tehran, is not a nuclear deal. It's a mini deal, Netanyahu said this week, according to Hebrew media. We will be able to handle it. The State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So there you go.
There's a whole other thing here, which you're not mentioning.
Okay.
And that's that Biden supposedly has made the Israelis backing down somewhat as a condition for brokering a deal with the Saudis. Now, you have to understand, Saudi Arabia, in terms of diplomacy and everything, an image, if Israel makes a deal with Saudi Arabia, it makes it much harder for anyone except Iran to turn against Israel. Among the Arabs, it's a big psychological and political, religiously, the Saudis are the religious nexus of Islam. They have Mecca, Medina. So now a lot of people will scream and condemn them. The Shiites don't like them. Iran, of course, is Shiite. I'm not going to start with this now. We went through this last time for about a half an hour, 40 minutes. The Shia and Sunni controversy. I explained the background and everything. Oh, no, do that now. Now's not the time for that.
Right. I mean, I don't care if you want to. That's okay. But
No,
yeah.
no, put it this way, I'm too tired for this now. There's not 10 minutes. It'll be 20 minutes, even if we rush.
All right.
There's other things coming up now.
Grimsborough says, what do you call chief circumcision? A ripoff. Joe L says, hi, Mr. Lawgic. Thoughts on the Bronze Age collapse? That's not for me. That's your question.
Not for me either. It's not my field. I don't know very much
field?
about this. I mean, iron is stronger than bronze, so therefore iron weapons.
When was the Bronze Age collapse?
I believe it's about over about 2500 BCE, 2000 BCE. We're moving to the Iron Age. Yeah, Bronze Age antedates that.
Oh, okay. So that's real. That's real ancient history. That's really not your forte. Try to stick within the last 2,000 years. You'll probably get a fuller answer.
Even a little, 2,000 years for sure. All right, a little. I know a little bit about that. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, but I want to ask you, if you were advising Biden, what would you tell him to do with Iran and their development of a nuclear program? Like, what would you? I mean, would you actually say that they should just go in there and bomb? Like, what do you think would be the best strategy for dealing with this situation?
Well, I would say first if we could use cyber warfare, but otherwise go in and bomb it out.
When you say cyber warfare, you mean like hack into their systems? And
they've done that. The Israelis are doing this all the time. The Israelis have done all sorts of things, and they've used remote machines to assassinate people. The Israelis, really, they did it, and it works.
Yeah. Well, I know America. Obama was infamous for that because he didn't always get the right target. So, Mary Coppola says Trump lived by keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Bless you and great logic. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. If we've covered Iran, so but I didn't get your real answer. So you're basically saying cyber warfare, and cyber warfare meaning what? You mean specifically to the nuclear
blow up
plants?
their plant, if you can. Natanz and the others,
but not like to the nation at large, like affecting their electricity grid on or anything like that. You mean?
Well, again,
you froze.
Also, would go full force with the CIA to sponsor anti-government groups to try to subvert and overthrow the government from the inside. Absolutely, to overthrow.
Can you respond to this claim?
It's an evil government.
Can you respond to this claim from Hamilton?
Trump did not strengthen Iran. No, he didn't.
I'm trying to even understand an argument to support.
I'd like to see what your source for that is. Send it without pay.
It's probably Mother Goose or I don't know. It could be Teen Vogue. Who knows?
I want to see a real source. And the real source. And I'm asking you, even if he doesn't pay, I want to see it. Let's see it. All right.
Ty Sloan says China's interest in Iran as well.
Oh yeah, of course. At a week in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I was actually a very big believer.
That's another thing, by the way. I really don't know much about this. My first wife, may she rest in peace, knew a lot, and she watched it. I am very worried over China and Taiwan.
You think
I am worried.
You think that's our next? You think that's?
I think that's going to be a big crisis there. I think it's going to be before Biden is still in the White House, or God forbid if he dies.
You think within the next? When you say while he's still in the White House, you mean like within the next 18 months?
Well, if I were China, I wouldn't wait and see if Trump or somebody like him gets in.
Right.
It would move, and they're ready to move. They build those islands. They have their Navy there.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? I don't think they think that we'll go to war to stop them from Taiwan.
I don't think
Taiwan makes the microchips for I understand, for half the world or more than that.
Yeah, that is definitely
important thing.
That is definitely their primary asset on the world stage.
As again, your mother always said, the one thing they both agree on is Taiwan and China Taiwan's a part of China.
Who both agrees on?
The communists and the nationalists both agreed that Taiwan was part of China. The nationalists wanted to recapture China from Taiwan, and the communists want to take Taiwan. Everybody says The only ones that didn't agree on that are the Japanese, who called it Formosa. That was the old Japanese name for Taiwan.
Are you okay with us switching over to American politics?
I may not know too much, but we can do it.
I wanted to share with my audience, and we can watch it together, a fiery questioning from Ted Cruz, from the head of the head of the or not one of the not Chris not Director Ray, from one of the heads of the FBI. Chinese Taiwan's well to keep the wealthy happy enough to not revolt against the CCP. Interesting.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So what I wanted to share this with you and my audience, because I saw this earlier today.
Gentlemen, every day when I'm home.
And I thought, my God, this was just fire from Ted Cruz. And so I'm going to watch it with you, Dad. You brought a movie to me. Okay. I'm going to bring a movie to you. Let's pull this up here. I like this screen. The screen is good.
Gentlemen, every day when I'm home in Texas, I hear from Texans who are deeply dismayed about the growing politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. If you are not, every one of you should be deeply concerned about the damage being done to the integrity of the institutions in which you operate.
Do you believe that the integrity of the FBI has been compromised?
Absolutely.
Okay. No, and the interesting thing, and the reason I value your opinion on this is because in certain ways that are not really visible to beyond that, which is obviously visible to anyone who sees you on camera here, I think that you're different from my audience and probably more similar to a typical American. Because I think when it comes to American politics, I think you pay probably, I don't think it's a daily thing that you're following. Like, I think you'll follow it when it's, you know, there are big developments. Perhaps you follow a little bit more because of my show, and every once in a while you make a suggestion to me and things of that nature, which is always appreciated. But I don't think that it's something that you consume, that the first thing in the morning you're like wondering what's going to happen with Trump or with some issue or with, you know, Biden bribery. You'll hear about it and you'll keep abreast of the news in general, but it's not something that you're going to engage other people talking about on a day-to-day basis.
Well, there's an expression in French, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same, which is not quite true. But a lot of this stuff is hyperbole and a lot of it not. However, I do watch intently what's going on now because I'm very concerned for the country, and the future of the country, with a number of things, including the woke business and other stuff, the rewriting of history. And history, there's a real history here in America. And there was also historically in America the idea. I was appalled when Kaepernick kneeled during the flag. Your grandmother, if I watched on television a baseball game when they played the Star Spangled Banner, your grandmother told me I should stand up and put my hand over my chest. Right. Tremendous respect to the country, the idea of the United States, and the United States in which I grew up. And the attitudes of that United States are changing in a way which I see as very dangerous, and dangerous to the very people, quote unquote, they're protecting, because they're not going to protect those people. Right. All they're going to do is protect the wealthy. Ultimately, that's what this is all about. It's about weakening the middle class, because the middle class is more moral historically, and that's true in England too. And in France, the middle class is more, and the middle class will prevent the wealthy from getting too wealthy. And we have these people with tremendous money now.
I don't know if that's true anymore.
What?
I don't know if the middle class has that ability anymore. With most
maybe
people,
not. Well, it's being emasculated.
Yeah, I think that used to be true, but I don't know if that's true with the way monies are earned today. I don't know if that's true anymore.
Yes. All right.
But yeah. So how much are you following the story with Biden and the story with the whistleblower and the FD 1023? Are you familiar with those terms, or you're not familiar with that?
I'm familiar with not the whistleblower. I'm familiar with the spy, the fellow that released the classified material.
Right. Well, that's so fine. There There's a whistleblower who made a report, which the report is called an FD 1023. There was a whole big fight between Congress and the FBI, where Congress wanted to get their hands on that FD 1023. And
Congress has the right to that.
Well, yeah,
100%.
Yeah, and Director Wray is refusing to give it to them. So
they should declare him in contempt.
That's what they were threatening. That's what they've been threatening to do. They were supposed to be doing something about it this week. Anyway, so this was at a hearing with one of the heads of the FBI. I don't remember his name. I think his name's going to come up when Ted Cruz is questioning him here. But and he really takes him to task. And I thought that this was such fire that I just wanted to share this clip with you and the audience. But the reason I ask you these questions is because I feel like your thoughts on this are probably more reflective of a typical American than even someone in my audience, because I think people who are more inclined to watch a show like mine are probably more interested in politics than your typical American. So while you might be more educated and I believe far more intelligent than a typical American, at the same time, just as far as like keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
I don't keep it my finger that much on the pulse of what's going on.
Right. And that's why
a little more widely read than most Americans.
You're more of a normie, as they would say. And that's why I'm wondering what normies are hearing. That's why I wonder what normies are thinking and feeling. So that's why I think that you add a unique element compared to most guests who I bring on here who, like me, are not normies. Or like most of my audience, I think are probably not normies.
My office hears regularly from FBI agents and from assistant U.S. attorneys who are likewise concerned about the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and this is profoundly damaging to the rule of law in our nation. Last month, a whistleblower brought to light the existence in the FBI of a report, an FD 1023, in which the informant alleges that President Biden and his family members engaged in a $5 million bribery scheme during his time as vice president.
Oh, I heard about this, yeah.
Deputy Director Abate, is it true that the FBI has a report making those allegations?
I'm not going to comment on that, Senator.
And why is that?
I'm just not going to comment on information we received, investigations.
Do you owe an obligation to the American people to be candid about evidence of corruption by the President of the United States?
This is an area that I'm not going to get into with you, Senator.
Well, I understand you don't want to, and that's why people are mad at the FBI, because you're stonewalling and covering up serious allegations of evidence of corruption from the president. Yesterday, Senator Chuck Grassley stood on the Senate floor and alleged that there are 17 recordings of this informant from Burisma, Ukrainian natural gas company. 15 of them are recordings, voice recordings of him talking to Hunter Biden. 2 of them are voice recordings of him talking to Joe Biden. Deputy Director Abate, does the FBI have 17 voice recordings laying out evidence of a bribery scheme?
Senator, I would add also that we've worked with the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, this is the Senate. We're the other side of the Capitol. This is the Senate. Do you have those 17 recordings?
I'm not going to comment on any investigative matters, Senator.
See, that's the problem.
Look at the arrogance. I'm not going to answer your question. Like, I don't have to answer your question. It's just astonishing. Like, who do you think you are? Like, who does
should be held in contempt?
Yeah. The Senate will never do it.
They won't do it. He knows it because the Democrats.
But the House may. The House may. The Senate never will, because they don't have enough control.
I had this conversation with Chris Wray too. This is why you are damaging the institution. The American people have a right to know whether there is serious, credible evidence that the President of the United States took a $5 million bribe. And by the way, if it's false, Chairman Durbin just rolled his eyes. If Chairman Durbin were interested in the rule of law, we would have a hearing on these allegations. But of course, the Democrats don't want a hearing on these allegations. And to be clear, if the allegations are false, you know who could disprove them? Joe Biden. He could call for this to be released publicly. But the FBI is stonewalling.
And that is a great point that Ted Cruz makes. You want to know how you know he's guilty? Because if he wasn't, he would say, release the tapes. Let everyone hear the tapes. What are you so afraid of? What are you so afraid of? I mean, what can be on those tapes? If it should exonerate you and show that this guy here is a liar.
I'm going to be careful how I put this. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening to you, Daddy. We hear you.
Anything that is straight and honest. Anyone who is straight and honest does not mind if they are examined or checked by a third party. And if someone says you can't question something, that implies that there's something rotten in Denmark there.
Now, I will point out, though, because now the critics will respond back. Well, what about Trump with his tax returns? What about this with that? What about the right to remain silent and all these other issues, which I'm frequently trumpeting. And here's the distinction. Here's the reason why. At least he should come forward to the Senate where these are not your enemies who are coming after you. It's when you're dealing with someone who is looking that the sole objective is to destroy you. That's where you basically have
these rights.
You have these rights, and there's an assumption when you're a defendant in a criminal case that the prosecution is looking for your scalp. They are the enemy. That's what they're all about. But over here, I mean, so who is the enemy? Are we the American people the enemy? Is it that he's afraid that the Republicans will twist something in there? I mean, I guess in theory, because let's face it, I'll be frank with you. If he was my counsel, I would tell him you always remain silent. That's just a knee-jerk reaction of any attorney. You always remain silent. You just remain silent and just stonewall. But the DOJ is not Biden. That's what's so horrific. The DOJ is not. The FBI is not Biden. That's what makes this so horrific. That's what shows their partisanship. Why are they so afraid of responding to a congressional demand that they share information? Who are they to start taking sides that we're on Team Biden and we're going to remain silent in order to help insulate him from any sort of scrutiny? That's what makes this so gross. That's what makes everyone say they are completely corrupt. Ted Cruz is spot on here when he's breaking him down, because they are the ones who are calling their own actions into question by refusing transparency in moments like this right here and saying, I refuse to answer. It's not even like this guy could get in trouble. He can't get personally in trouble. Why are you so afraid of sharing information of an investigation that the American people handed to you to investigate? They charged you. You're working for us. And you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to side." It's like someone hires a private detective to go check on his or her spouse, and they take the spouse's side and says, "I'm not going to turn over these." What are you talking about? We're the ones who hired you. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable.
Yes, I happen to concur with you. I think it's totally unreasonable, and he should speak. I'm sure he's been told not to speak.
I'm positive he's been told not to speak.
But yeah, and
by the way, entry required, as said, and this is Rumble Rant said, question for Joe's dad: what do you think is the U.S. idea of bringing democracy to Afghanistan and Iraq? That's a great question. I'm going to pause in this thing here, and I want to have you address this. What do you think? I'm going to read this Rumble Rant. You didn't see this. This is on a different channel from what rolls through here. What did you think of the U.S.'s idea of bringing democracy to Afghanistan and Iraq? Phenomenal question.
Okay. All right. English democracy took 5 centuries to develop. Really. From the 1300s to the 1800s. You did not have real democracy in England until a Parliamentary Act of 1867. Which gave the vote to all the men, and really, until the women got the vote in the 19-teens. That's what it takes. You cannot put democracy in a place where the people are not trained for democracy. People have to learn to live with democracy. They have to learn how to vote in a democratic state. They have to know how to maintain a democratic state. And if you don't have that, it's not likely to work if imposed from the outside. Japan, even, I mean, Japan is special in a way because they had the emperor. And the emperor they thought the emperor was God, and the emperor's talking to them and telling them to do it. But I don't see where we have imposed real democracy anywhere outside in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, even Latin America. Look what's going on generally. There's a lot of issues there with democracy there. It's very difficult to Mexico, I mean, on and off. It's very difficult. Democracy is a very fragile plant that has to be fertilized and watered constantly. I even see it at risk here. And I would not have said this 25 years ago. Absolutely not. But it's different today.
The reason I really appreciate that question is because recently I've been railing against the left for constantly referring to our country as a democracy rather than as a constitutional republic. And the reason I think this is so important, and the reason I think that we are an utter failure, as you correctly point out, in trying to impose democracies elsewhere, in part, is that democracy standing on its own without being buffered by a constitution in the nature that our constitution operates is doomed to fail, much as it ultimately failed in Greece and in Rome. Because what happens, and this is what the reason the founders created the Constitution and the framework that we have here, where we have different governance for a Senate versus a House, where we have equal representation irrespective of size in the Senate, and you have at the same time you have in the House a reflection of the size and population of various states in the House, and they have different areas that have more control versus less control and are forced to work together with having a filibuster where it's like you can't just pass things on a 50% majority, but you need to get a 60% majority. These things are designed to protect a democracy from failing. And if you don't have a constitutional republic, you just simply put in a straight democracy a la what they had in Greece, that becomes the worst form of tyranny imaginable. Because, you know, I've used the old adage that democracy is two lions and a wolf deciding what they're going to eat for supper. And that's what ends up happening, is that the majority ends up imposing the worst imaginable tyranny of the minority. And that is ultimately what ends up happening invariably, because they say, look, we have the power, we have the control. They literally can enslave the minority. I mean, I'm not speaking figuratively. I mean, literally take their money, force them to think and dress however they want. That is what happened. That's what is ultimately possible in a democracy. And there's no incentive for the majority not to do it. They have every personal interest in taking advantage of the minority. They're only buffered by whatever morality and good conscience they have. But when need comes along, starvation comes along, limited assets comes along, famine or disease comes along, the first one to suffer is the minority. And that's why you can trying to say that we're going to try to impose a democracy in a foreign nation where they're not even buffered by a constitutional republic. You're not making them better off than they are in a monarchy. You're not making them any better off, and arguably you're making them far worse. So but you have the virtue signaling of making you feel good about yourself, like, oh, we imposed democracy, so now they have the will of the people there, and you're basically you're imposing the potentially the worst form of tyranny if you're successful, which we rarely are. But even if you would be successful, it's still doomed to failure. And that's why I think that all these efforts that we've had to impart democracy in the Middle East it's a stupid idea which has never worked. And if it did work, it would be a disastrous outcome for the citizens of those countries. That's my thoughts. I'd love your feedback on what I just said.
Well, first of all, since I am a little bit of a nitpicker sometimes.
Please do.
Okay. What do you know about the British Constitution?
I know, I would say historically, probably 1/10 what you know about it. I mean, I know more from a legal sense than most of the laws that we've taken.
Well, get ready. Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Technically, speaking of Constitution, the only time that Great Britain had a written constitution was during the period of the Commonwealth in the 1650s. They had the instrument of government, and that was abolished when the king came back with the restoration of the House of Stuart in 1660. So England does not have a written constitution. They do have a constitution effectively by precedent and law, but they don't have a written constitution. Today, there is no such thing, and there hasn't been since 1660.
But their system of governance with Parliament and the Prime
Right,
Minister.
and they have Parliament. All right, and Parliament has it's very fragile unless you have a real majority, and that's not so easy to get. After the 1867, I said that's when it really becomes democratic. Up until then, the voting was you had to be very well off to vote, but that changed. What you're saying, I think, holds a lot of water, but that's also, again, the way people are trained. If they're trained to participate and to vote and to plan on voting and try to vote, then that's going to maintain the democracy. If they don't, it's a problem. And they figure, I'm in power. I mean, for example, the example that I love is Syria, where officially the president of Syria is elected. And of course, he was selected, the one that's now the president, Bashar al-Assad, by daddy, Hafez al-Assad. And the reason Bashar al-Assad used poison gas and everything under the sun to stay in power is because he knows he's an Alawi, which is a subset Muslim group. And he knows very well that if he's out of power, his uncles and brothers and everyone will be under the axe, possibly dead. So he stays there to help out the mishpacha, the family, to help out the family. Basically, that's what he's doing, to help out the clan and the family. Yeah.
No.
Listen, it is getting close to midnight. I'm
gonna wrap up at 12 sharp. I want my audience to, if they just hear the last 3 minutes of Ted Cruz grilling a body.
Oh, it's very nice.
And so let me just wrap that up here so that they can savor the balance of this.
Would you agree?
Two things, Senator. No one's stonewalling. The 1023.
You just said you refused to answer the question.
In response to a subpoena.
Okay, then why'd you refuse to answer my question?
The pertinent information is there, and I reject your assertion that the FBI is politicized.
Why did you refuse to answer my question?
I just answered your question.
Okay, so yes, you have a 1023. Do you have the 17 recordings? Yes or no?
I'm not going to get further into that.
So you're stonewalling. You can't say I'm not refusing to answer your question, but I won't answer your question.
I'm going to answer within the parameters that we operate in.
That's the problem. The FBI has right now an unlimited hubris that you believe you are unaccountable.
Yep.
You don't believe you're accountable to the United States Congress, and you don't believe you're accountable to the American people. And you are doing damage. The FBI is a great institution. When I go home to Texas, people ask me, should we abolish the FBI? Now, I tell them no, because you have heroes and patriots working for you that are catching child predators, that are catching terrorists. But you're sitting there happily erecting a wall to protect Joe Biden. Will you provide to this committee, not the House, the Senate Judiciary Committee, will you provide the FD 1023 and will you provide the 17 recordings so we can assess what is the evidence, the specific credible evidence that Joe Biden personally took a $5 million bribe from a foreign national?
Senator, we will work with this committee, you and other members, to provide the information within the parameters of the process.
Will you provide the FD 1023, yes or no?
I will take that back and we will work with our
So you're not answering that. Will you provide the 17 recordings?
We will take that back and we'll work with you.
So you're not answering that either. Did you investigate in any way, shape, or form these allegations?
Senator, once again, I'm not going to comment.
So you're not going to say whether you did your job?
We do our job to the very best of our ability.
Well, not here. You're not answering a single question to the American people. And you may think this is esoteric. I promise you, millions of Americans are concerned. You know who isn't concerned? Not a single Senate Democrat. We're going to go through this whole hearing. Not one Democrat will ask a question about this. You know who else isn't concerned? The corporate media, who is joining with the Democrats in covering up this evidence. If Joe Biden is innocent, the evidence should be made public and demonstrate that he's innocent. But if he is not, is it true this informant who alleged that he personally took a bribe was an informant the FBI had relied upon previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
In each and every investigation that we have, all the work that we do,
I asked you
the
yes or no
expectation
question.
is that every logical avenue of investigation be pursued.
I asked you a
to
yes
its
or no
fullest.
question. Are you going to answer it?
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Was the informant
Wow.
one you had relied on previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, we run down every piece of information.
You're not answering it then. You're refusing to answer it.
Objectively,
So you're refusing to answer the
to
question.
the fullest
Unbelievable.
extent possible.
refusing to answer the
relentlessly,
question. Is that
and
correct?
aggressively in all instances.
Senator, your
It's
time is
disgraceful. It's disgraceful, Deputy Director Abate. Disgraceful.
Senator.
Wow. Crazy, huh? It's crazy.
Absolutely.
It's like
I
basically-
agree with Ted Cruz.
Yeah. I mean, how can anyone not? What a body is basically claiming is that we do the job to the best of our abilities, and he's disputing implicitly that part of his job is actually answering to those who put him in power. That is his job. When he's stonewalling and saying we have a process that we're going to follow, that's stalling. That is not doing your job. That is ignoring a material aspect of your job, which is not simply to conduct investigations, but to report on what you've successfully investigated, and say yes, there is something here, or no, there isn't anything there, and how you reach those assessments, and provide your source material for that. That's your job. Not simply to decide that you're going to decide what you're going to share with the public at no time in the future. I mean, it's asinine. It's so completely outrageous. Let me get to the last couple of super chats here, and then I'm gonna wrap up and let you go to sleep. So this was it. Adding to what Great Lawgic said about Japan, even their democracy is still quasi-subservient to the old cliques and the zaibatsus, which never really broke up. It takes centuries. Yep. And Conda Strike says, UK has written and underwritten, i.e. codified and uncodified constitution, as does Canada, which follows the same tradition. Cheers to Great Lawgic. Thank you so much, Conda Strike. I really appreciate that. That is our show. Dad, I love you. I'm so glad that you're able to come in here. I don't know if I'll be able to get you in here before the summer, because in the summer
I'm going away, you know that.
Right. No, so
Taking your son.
Yes, he is taking he tries every year when to go to Israel for much of the summer, and to take two of his grandchildren with him, either two grandsons or two granddaughters. And this year he's supposed to be taking my youngest son together with one of my nephews. So yeah, I love you, Dad. I thank you for joining us. And
be well.
He's asking me, will you please have Great Lawgic back on in a week or so? Do you think you'll be able to come back in next week?
I'm not sure. We'll talk.
We'll talk about
discuss it.
We will discuss it. Anyway, Dad, I love you. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to the audience for joining me. Dad, stick around for a second. And I will be back here tomorrow evening at 10 p.m. Till then. Oh, by the way, I had one more entry required. Said he could have said it was Russian disinformation like Hunter's laptop. Yeah, he could have said that, and he didn't. That was a rumble rant that came in at the very end there. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. I think we're good. Yep. All right, I got everything, and now you have everything. I thank you all for joining me. Have a good night, and as always, Godspeed.